My name is Alex Dworjan. I'm an Ansible solution specialist, and today I'm going to talk about how Ansible and ServiceNow can work together. So how can Ansible and ServiceNow actually work together? And why do I want to leverage these tools together? ServiceNow obviously is a great tool for providing a business interface, a source of truth, a CMDB, that typical approval process. Once I've gone through my approval process, I need something to handle those actions. And that's where the automation platform comes in, really as my operations interface to launch things inside the cloud in my on-premise environments to make sure my systems are provisioned, configured based on what that request is coming from ServiceNow. By integrating the two tools together, now I can get to full closed loop automation, which means my change requests can be fully created and closed out leveraging automation. My incidents can be updated. I now have a common interface, whether ServiceNow is my front end or Ansible is my front end, to make sure that everything is consistent across the board. The three most common use cases that I see in terms of automation and ServiceNow together is that change request process. So whether it's creating it through Ansible or it's being created through ServiceNow, I can now automate that process. So once the approvals have been completed for that change request, I can go through the process of deploying a new VM in my Azure production environment. Then once it's completed, I can notify the end user that it's done and is ready for closeout review, or really automate that full process as well. For incidents, whether I'm leveraging Ansible to create that incident ticket, or I have some sort of monitoring tool that is auto creating those incidents for me, I can then have that reach out to the automation platform to pull additional information to update that ticket, whether it's a log set or whether it's more information just about that host. And then I can even go through that process of doing some sort of auto remediation and get to the point where I can have no human intervention for some of my very basic tickets. And because Ansel is providing this information back, I have that single set of information, single source of truth to keep throughout this process. And again, now as I keep this up to date, I can also update that CMDB to really ensure that all of my information is accurate and up to date. Even if certain users don't have access to update ServiceNow, I've given them limited access through the playbooks that I've created in Ansible to keep those systems up to date. So in terms of an architecture and how this works, most of this really connects from ServiceNow into the automation platform through that ServiceNow workflow. So you may already have your requests built out. You may already have your ServiceNow CMDB. You may even already have your workflows built out in ServiceNow, which include all of your necessary approval processes. Well, once I've completed those approvals, instead of handing those particular items off to a admin to handle them manually, I can actually have ServiceNow reach out directly to the automation platform to launch automation and complete those tasks. So as part of that, the automation platform can pull directly from that ServiceNow CMDB to use that as an inventory to make sure I have those hosts to automate against. And then obviously, as I go through that process, I can send updates back to that change request to that CMDB to ensure that everything is maintained and up to date as we go through that process, leveraging the inventory plugin and ServiceNow modules that are all part of the Ansible certified ServiceNow collection. So obviously talking high level about an architecture is great, but let's see some of these different pieces in action to get a better understanding of how they all fit together. So first I'm going to show you how I can leverage that ServiceNow CMDB to pull that source of truth into the automation platform. So as part of that certified collection, we do have a ServiceNow plugin. So that's what I'm leveraging here today. And I've defined a few extra things, essentially defining what I want to pull from that ServiceNow CMDB. So some of the columns that I'm going to pull directly from that CMDB, maybe some additional variables that I want to create inside my automation platform because I leveraged them for my automation. And then I'm also going to create groups because, as we talked about, I may not want to automate across my entire environment. I may want to pull some of the information that already exists inside ServiceNow, like is it a production environment, a UAT environment, a development environment. So this is the playbook that I've essentially have defining what that particular plugin will look like. And then inside my automation platform, I do have my ServiceNow certified inventory, which I've then created that source to pull from that YAML file that I've created. So source from a project, and I've got it set up where it's also going to automatically overwrite any variables. So as I add and remove from that CMDB, that full process is taken care of. So this actually pulls in all of the hosts that exist inside my CMDB. as well as pulls in the information about them. So as you can see, it sets that Ansible host parameter that I defined. It's pulling in the classification, the fully qualified domain name, IP address, setting that extra variable that I use. All of this is pulled directly from that ServiceNow CMDB, including the groups, which, as you saw, I defined were the operating system and the classification. So I can see the classification of development, production, or UAT, which then I can use as limits in my playbooks so I can only automate against certain pieces of my environment or against certain operating systems, depending on what I'm looking to do. So it gives me a lot more flexibility in terms of how I manage and run automation based on that source of truth that I've created. Next, I'm going to look at the change request process and how I can look at Ansible to make updates, create that as I try to manage all of my automation, either through ServiceNow as a front end, which what I'm going to do in this case, or I could launch these exact same workflows or job templates through the automation platform. So in this case, I'm actually going to create a change request that I've added some dynamic capability to input the short description for what my change request will do. I could variabilize all of this as well. And then obviously I do want to notify an end user that, by the way, this approval is awaiting their review. So I can send all of that information again, variabilize as much as possible, and provided a link to the end user that says, this is ready, please take a look and update or approve this particular change request. And because for me, I want to move very quickly, I actually have Ansible waiting for the approval before it goes on to the remainder of my process. So in this case, I'm actually going to launch this through the service catalog inside ServiceNow. And I've created a multi-cloud approval that leverages whichever hypervisor the end user wants to create it in. So in this case, I'm going to create a demo.shadowman.dev. In this case, I want a Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 system on my Red Hat virtualization hypervisor. So I'm going to click order now. And as far as the end user is concerned, automation is happening behind the scenes. They just need to be notified once the end system is done, which will be built into this process as well. But to get things started, I can go into the jobs, my automation platform, and as you can see, this large workflow job has actually already started, with that first step being creating that ServiceNow workflow, and then it goes through the full process of provisioning that virtual machine, pulling in that dynamic inventory, going through my configuration process, which can be ensuring the system is properly subscribed, ensuring all the appropriate repositories are enabled. And then I even added in an application level approval process before I add in my Apache web server, my IIS server if it's Windows. And then I even go through the process of adding it into my load balancer before notifying the end user and closing out that change request. So as you can see here, I do have an email waiting for me with that approval request. So this is directly through the automation platform to, in this case, myself, because I am also the approver. It will pull me directly into that change request. As you can see, it did add in that dynamic short description. So in this case, I want to create a new Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 server in Red Hat Virtualization. Just for the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to be the approval. So I am Christian for the technical approval. And then from the financial side of things, I will also approve so this process can continue. So I will continue that process as Howard to ensure that this can continue to go through and actually deploy the end product. But as you can see here, this change request currently is in the scheduled status, and that particular job, which was waiting on the end user to have that approval completed, will continue through the process because it's going to detect that, yes, it was actually approved, so it was waiting for that particular process, and now it's moved it into the implementation step, which, as you can see, has auto been updated without the end user needing to go into that process. So this is going to continue on the back end. It will go through that approval process. It will continue to do that deployment. And we'll see here in a second that this will also then have that capability to update that change request once this full process is completed. And I'll, again, send an email to the user if they want to do a manual review to ensure that everything is up to the speed that they need it to be. So we moved ahead, and as you can see, the entire workflow has completed. I've gone through that full provisioning, configuration, and application deployment process with that end user email and updating my, in this case, ServiceNow catalog and my change request. So you can see here, I've got an email waiting for me with that web link. So maybe this is my end user to let them know that their application is ready. So this is the web application link to my web application. I've also added into the load balancer so I can email them that link. So this is fully up and running and ready to go. I've also built into my process to actually, again, notify the approvers that the change request is ready for the review. So for the sake of this demo, I use the same email address. Once again, this will take me directly to that change request from before. So I can see that this is actually now in the review state. I could have fully automated this process to close it out, but for my personal use, I just wanted to have that manual review process so I can say web app deployed successfully. So I successfully deployed it, so I can close out this change request. Now that full administration process is done, though I could have automated that as well, since I've built into my automation process to actually test and verify that my web application is up and running. Even if they don't have email, maybe I care about that initial catalog. So that request number has also been closed out with that web link. So as you can see here, it's actually gone through that close complete state with those exact same links and updates throughout the process. So I've fully really automated everything related to the deployment across multiple teams with an initial catalog request all the way through the change request process, leveraging the combination of Ansible and ServiceNow together. So the last piece I want to talk about today is incident management leveraging Ansible. So as we talked about, this can be creating the incident itself. So whether I've got a user manually entering in this information and then that populating ServiceNow, or I have some other tool, monitoring tool connecting to ServiceNow, I can create that incident with as much information as I need, including variables that you've created inside that incident ticket. So if you've provided some sort of customization to your ServiceNow instance, I can update, in this case, an operating system, IP address, and VM name that I've personally added into my incident ticketing system. This can also then be leveraged to provide that exact same capability when I want to update incidents. So even if I have my monitoring solution creating incidents for me, I can still leverage that process to then reach out to the automation platform to resolve the incident and update those particular tickets. So in this case, I'm actually leveraging Prometheus as my monitoring solution, and I have that integrated in with ServiceNow to provide any sort of alerts to create incidents inside my ServiceNow instance. So as you can see, I'm monitoring several different endpoints, and I've conveniently stopped one of my node exporters, which is actually my monitoring solution. So it's in a pending state right now, and as soon as it goes to alert, it will actually automatically create that incident with some of the vital information that automation will need in order to resolve that incident. Obviously, on the back end of ServiceNow, I've added in some capability to be able to leverage the exact node that is down on, because I don't want to have to run automation across my entire environment. I just want to specifically go against that particular node. And I also want to make sure that I'm responding to the correct incident. So in this case, just the fact that that node exporter is down, but I've added in things for disk space, CPU load issues, and memory issues, so I can, again, automatically respond to those incidents. So you can be very creative in terms of what that capability is for you. So in this case, I've actually automatically created that incident. And as you can see, my integration in with Prometheus in this case created that short description. But I've built in automation to ensure that as part of that, it's also going to reach out to the automation platform to resolve that particular incident. So as you can see in the background, there's my automated response to a node exporter down incident. And because of the fact that this particular incident was created with that particular VM, which again was part of that customization I've added in, it's only going to update this exact VM only. So it's starting that Prometheus node exporter. As you can see, it actually only runs on that one single host. And then it goes through the process of actually updating my incident in that next step of the workflow. So as you can see, it's actually been closed out, and it will update, in this case, the work notes to say, yes, this particular item was resolved, the ticket's been closed. And if I want to go and verify, obviously, that issue is no longer prevalent, I can go back into Prometheus, and that node exporter is now up and running. My incident's been resolved, and in this case, with absolutely no human intervention. So it, again, can streamline some of your processes, and even things that, while they don't necessarily have high risk, I can still make some of those request process of disk space or CPU or memory issues an automated process to ensure that my end users don't need to wait for a particular administrator to respond. Thank you for taking the time to learn about Ansible and ServiceNow. Please reach out to your Red Hat team if you have any questions.